Hi, I'm Ann. Today I have for you a tutorial for how to make what I am calling the Boujee Salon block. That is what you're seeing up here, and I just think it's so beautiful in these rich dark fabrics, and I really like these warmer low volume rather than like a stark white. I just think it really makes it bougie. And so this cat's cradle unit here, I have two tutorials for you. One will show you how to make this block, making these cat's cradles units one at a time. And the second tutorial will show you how to make these two at a time. One at a time is good for charm squares or 5-inch squares. Two at a time is good for 10-inch squares, layer cakes, or larger. At the end of the tutorials, I will quickly touch base with you and let you know how I'm doing on Halo. So let's get started. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and take a screenshot or write down these cutting instructions. So the two large squares in the corners are two 4.5-inch squares of a dark fabric. Then you'll need a 5-inch square cut diagonally into two triangles for the cat's cradle, and that's from a medium fabric. You'll also need two 2.5-inch squares for the outer corners of the cat's cradle unit. And finally, you will need background fabric, two 3-inch squares cut diagonally into 4 triangles. So we'll start sewing by grabbing one of the 2.5-inch squares and one of the small background triangles. Line up the 90-degree corners of the triangle with the outside edges of two of the square sides, right sides together, and stitch a scant 1/4-inch seam starting from one of the square edges, not the triangle point. Do this with both of the 2.5-inch outside squares, and then take it to the iron and press toward the 2.5-inch squares. Then head back to the machine, and I like to put them back on a design board or on an area where the block's laid out so I don't get confused about which edge of the triangle to sew on. And once you've got that figured out, just flip over the other triangle for these corner units and right sides together, stitch again starting from the straight edge, scant 1/4-inch seam all the way through the edge of the other triangle as shown. Do that with both of the corner units. Take it to the iron and this time press toward the triangle. So this part is crucial if you're doing the one at a time cat's cradle method. Take a ruler and starting at the outside corner of the small square, measure along one side of the triangle 4 7/8 inches and make a little mark on your triangle where that measurement is. And do the same thing on the other side. Do this to both triangles. Then take a ruler edge and line it up to each dot. Take a look at the space between the corner of the square and the center of that triangle edge and make sure that it's a 1/4 inch. Mine came out that way. I think if you're somewhat accurate on your seams, it will work out that way. Then take it to the cutting table and cut between those two dots on both triangle units. Back at the machine, grab the two large triangles and put them right sides together with the units you just sewed. And I think it's really important to use pins at this step because if there's one step of making these one at a time that's going to get screwed up, it's going to be this one because you're sewing right on the bias. So take your time, don't pull or push, and when you get to the very end of the triangle, use something or just go really slow to make sure that that little point doesn't wang off one way or the other. It tends to do that. So I just usually grab a tool and just kind of hold on to the fabric there so it won't slip off. Then go back to the iron and press both units toward the dark triangle. Then grab a ruler with a diagonal line across it. Line that up with the triangle going through the center of your unit and trim the block down to 4.5 inches square. So at this point, you're basically dealing with a 4-patch. You're going to take the left-hand squares, flip them right sides together over the right-hand squares, and sew them together. Take these units to the iron and press toward the dark squares. For this final seam, you'll be able to nest the seams from one row to the next. So put them right sides together and kind of mush the seams together to nest them. And I like to poke a pin in just behind where I've nested seams. Then I just line the whole thing up really well on all 4 sides and pop another pin in towards the what's going to be the end of my seam. So for this final seam, just stitch along the edge at a scant 1/4 inch. So there's a few things we can do before we press to help make this block as flat as possible. The first thing is to take a seam ripper and just pick out those 2 or 3 stitches in the center of the block there, only right up to the seam we just sewed, but not past it. And the other thing we can do is take a pair of scissors and just put a little clip in the side right up to but not into the seam on each end where all of the triangle seams come together. And then just set the seam, warm it up, and when you open it up, you can kind of pick open the center there. It almost looks like a little 4-patch when you get it right. And press that, and then press the seams right next to it towards the opposite block, and let those corner seams lay just as they are, and press the whole thing and flip it over. Give it a good press, and you'll see that that center seam is nice and flat. And for the final step, you'll want to measure 8.5 inches and trim off any excess. I just line up the 4.25 inch line on the intersections of the 4-patch arrangement and trim to the outside any extra. Okay, go ahead and pause the video so you can write these measurements down, or you can sign up for a free pattern in the description below. To make the Boujee Salon 2 at a time cat's cradle, you will need 2 4.5 inch dark squares, 1 4.5 inch by 5.5 inch medium rectangle, 1 2.5 inch by 5 inch medium rectangle, and 1 3.5 inch by 5 inch rectangle from your background fabric. So to begin, take your background piece and the 2.5 inch medium piece and stitch them together with a scant 1/4 inch seam along the long edge. Then take it over to the iron and press toward the smaller piece. Once it's nice and flat, measure across the 5 inch side and cut it in half at 2.5 inches. Then back at the machine, put them right sides together so that the similar fabrics are on opposite ends as shown. and stitch a scant 1/4 inch seam down the long side. Back at the iron, get a pair of scissors and find the center of the seam along that long side and snip the edge there so that you can press these different directions, but don't snip into the seam, just right up to it. Then you can press them opposite directions and get that piece nice and flat. So grab a pen or whatever you like to use to mark and flip the unit upside down and just put a little dot right in the intersection of the seams at the inside corner of the squares, and draw a line from one corner of the outside of the block across the nearest intersection dot and all the way to the other side wherever that lands. Do it to the other side so that you've got 2 lines going through that intersection. And back at the machine, put this unit right sides together with the larger medium piece that you cut and stitch along each of those lines you drew. Back at the iron, you're going to take a ruler and trim to a 1/4 inch to the outside of each of the stitch lines. Then just set the seams, get it warm before you open it up, and you'll press toward the larger triangle. And there you have your 2 at a time cat's cradle. Just like the 1 at a time cat's cradle, you will use the diagonal line on a ruler and line that up with the triangle in your unit and trim down to 4.5 inches square. So you'll sew the left hand square to the right hand square as if you're making a 4 patch for each of the 2 rows using a scant 1/4 inch seam. Then take it to the iron and press toward the large dark squares. And just like in the 1 at a time block version, you can nest those seams up in the center. Again, I like to put a pin in right behind the nested seam to keep it in place. And line those pieces up really well all the way around. This one got a little wonky on me, so I popped an extra pin in there just to keep it from getting worse. Yeah. And this final seam will be sewn with a scant 1/4 inch. Then take it back over to the iron, and just like the 1 at a time version, we're going to snip along the seam edge, but not as far as into that last seam we just sewed, on either side just above where all those triangles come together. And then we'll get the seam ripper out, and just like before, we'll pick out the 2 or 3 stitches that are in the center of the block, only up to that seam we just sewed. And I'm just going to work my way from the bottom up to the top on this one. I'm just going to open up that center there and spin those seams. See, it looks like a tiny 4 patch. And then I can turn that block over and give it one final press. Then get a ruler and line up the 4¼ inch mark on your ruler with the 4 patch intersections there in your block assembly. This one got a little wonky on me. What I do is I just poke a pin into the areas where I need to pay attention when I'm sewing it, the blocks together, so that I can compensate for it at that time. So I was able to get 8 more blocks done since my last video, which technically was 2 weeks ago, so I'm slowing down a little bit, but I've been busy working on Boujee, so I do have my next 8 blocks cut out, and I will make myself do those before I am allowed to do any other sewing. So thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.